Hey friends, Shauna from glittergivesomemore.com. We're going to do a quick video on how we created this peek-a-boo pink ribbon cup. I started with a 20-ounce skinny cup, sanded, washed, and spray painted it pink. Then I took a 3-inch piece of cardstock to trace off that section where we're going to have the band. And that's going to give us the bottom of the band. It's 3 inches up from the bottom of the cup. I use that just kind of as a straight edge guide. And I will go through and use electrical tape to tape that off. And this is just an area that is not going to get glittered. That is the only purpose of the electrical tape at this point. So you can absolutely use your vinyl cutter and create a vinyl rectangle to get the same purpose. Once we get that taped off, I'm going to take a 1-inch piece of cardstock, line that up to the bottom of the electrical tape, and then I will trace it off again. And that's going to give us the top of the band. I'm just using a normal pencil to trace that off. And that gives me the top of my band. Tape that off with electrical tape. And now you have a 1-inch band, 3 inches up from the bottom of the cup. All of the measurements can be adjusted. If you want to leave this off or you want to keep it on, all of the measurements can be adjusted to your personal preferences. Once we get the band taped off, we need to go through and mark off where that V is, where the peekaboo is going to be. So this is the halfway point of the cup around. So I took a piece of cardstock, measured off the halfway point, and then I folded it in half, and that's what the pencil mark we just did is. And that gives us the middle part of the front of the cup. So now we're taking electrical tape and tracing the halfway point down to the middle point so that the V is nice and symmetrical. So I did that on both sides. So I'm taking the halfway mark that we did using cardstock, lining it up with the middle mark, and that's going to give us a nice symmetrical V. And again, that's just an area that we're not going to glitter. That's where the peekaboo ribbon is going to go. And I marked it off so that when I go through and I glitter my cup, I know where not to put the pink ombre. I use matte Mod Podge for glittering most of the time, and I just use matte Mod Podge because I can get it off Amazon in the great big jug. I know a lot of people prefer hard coat Mod Podge. That's cool too. I just, like I said, I go with the one that I get the big old jug of. When you're using Mod Podge, you want to make sure that you're applying it smooth. Any lumps, bumps, and ridges will show in your finished glitter. So that's what we're doing now. We're just taking off any excess and getting it out as smooth as possible. Once you like where your Mod Podge is, as far as being smooth enough, you start with glittering. I start with the bottom of the cup, get full coverage there, and then I'll start moving into the cup. So my first layer of glitter, my first color of glitter, we're going to do completely flat to begin with until we're ready to start transitioning colors. Then we tilt the cup up, raise the glitter shaker a little higher, and allow the glitter to sprinkle down. This helps you avoid having hard edges in your glitter when you're transitioning colors. If you're new to ombre, there's a lot of different tricks and tips people have, and you got to try different ones to see what works for you. I recommend starting with very similar colors in different shades. So like kind of different shades of the same color. It is easier to get the ombre effect when you're having the same color in different shades than it is to start with 2 very different colors and to get them to transition nicely. And we're going to let that dry. So we got the first layer of glitter done. Let it dry. Dry brush off all the excess. I just use a really hard bristle brush for this. And we're trying to pull off any glitter that's not adhered to the cup. This helps the glitter from moving around when you put on your next layer. So to do the next layer of glitter, it's done the exact same, where we take the Mod Podge, get it as smooth as possible. Second layer of glitter, or the second layer of Mod Podge over the glitter will take a little bit more Mod Podge than the first, and you'll have a little bit longer to work with. The first layer has a tendency to dry a little faster than the second layer. So this is kind of like your finishing layer where everything is perfectly smooth, and then you start adding on your glitter. I go flat for the first color and then tilt up when I'm ready to start transitioning. That creates the sprinkle down of glitter that's going to give me space to fill in with the next color of glitter so you don't have that hard line. Lasting Love was the first color. Then we're going to transition into Pinky Promise. I've got the cup tilted again. We want that to sprinkle into the Lasting Love, create the solid Pinky Promise section, and create another sprinkle down effect where we're going to fill in the gaps with Barely Blush, which is our final color of the pink ombres. And it is still a pink glitter. It's just a really light pink glitter. Once that is done and the glitter is still wet, you'll remove your tape. You'll let it dry brush off the excess glitters, and then we will come in and do the white glitter in the V section of the cup. It's done the exact same way. I don't tape anything off. I just freehand into the V. Get it as smooth as possible, and it can be a little bit more challenging because it's hard to get your brush into that V section. But we're going over this. We're going to do a first layer of soft snow, which is a little bit finer, but it's not fine, but it's not as chunky as what we're going to end with. So the lumps, bumps, and ridges will be a little bit easier to disguise if you have any. So don't stress too much about getting it perfectly smooth. Just do the best that you can. So we go over this with soft snow. It is an iridescent white glitter. And this is for background coverage because we're going to go over it again with, like I said, a chunkier glitter. We're going to let that dry brush it off, and then go over it with crushed crystal. So again, I freehand the second layer of glitter for this section, following the edge of the first layer. It's easier to get the second layer smooth than it is the first layer, at least in my opinion. And then we're going to go over that with crushed crystal. We're going to let crushed crystal dry. We'll dry brush that off, and then we're going to actually epoxy twice. So the next time you see this cup, it will be epoxied twice, and it will have a water slide, but ignore the water slide because I end up taking that off. I do pat down with my finger the chunkier glitters to make them lay a little bit flat, just to make it less epoxy to get it smooth. So that's what I'm doing there, is just patting down my chunky glitters. Okay, so now we've epoxied twice. It's nice and smooth. That water slide decal is on there that we are going to end up taking off. And now we're doing the peekaboo section of the cup. So I have this SVG pink ribbon vinyl that I've cut twice. So the first one here, this is just to create the peekaboo effect where I don't want the paint to go. So I'm laying that down. This is just cheap vinyl. I think it is a permanent vinyl, but it's a cheap vinyl that I have tons of. So that's what we use to create one section of the peekaboo. Now I'm saran wrapping off the bottom of the cup, and I'll use painter's tape to section off. I'm following that V line to keep paint off of my pink glitters. Now keep in mind with the SVG, when I cut it twice. I cut it first with my vinyl that I'm going to use for the peekaboo, like the spray paint part, but I also cut a second with the prettier vinyl that I'm going to have the outline edge. So the first layer of paint was white, then I went over it with a pink and a sprinkle of dark pink to get a little bit of a speckle effect. Remove the tape. This is all after it's dried. I guess I should mention that. It's dried, it's good to go. And then we're going to remove the vinyl. And I use my weeding tool to get the vinyl lifted so that I can just pull it up. Be careful not to scratch the paint, which is what I did right there. Once you get this vinyl removed, we're going to go over it with an outline vinyl. It was cut from the same SVG, but it was done with an offset path. I created it in Illustrator. There's the offset path. So I created an Illustrator. I know you can do it in Cricut. I just don't know how, so I apologize for that, not being able to explain it to you, but I'm sure there's tutorials on it. I freehanded placement on the center portion. of the ribbon, and then I tried to freehand that second one, but you'll see that was a fail. So there's me thinking, well, we'll just stick that on there freehand, and then that was like, nope, just kidding. We'll go back and use transfer tape. Way easier. So there you have the outline ribbon, and we're adding our strips of vinyl to the edges of the V. I'm just picking up the tails of the ribbon because there is a little bit of an overlap, and I want my tails to be on top of the strips. So for the strips, I use my paper cutter. For this one, I used my paper cutter. You can absolutely use your vinyl cutter for that as well. Just create a rectangle in the length and width that you want and run it through your cutter, and you can still apply it. I apply it like stickers. I just peel it off and freehand it. And you can still do that if you cut your rectangles with your vinyl cutter. And I just stuck a little bit of a paper underneath there so it didn't stick to my water slide. But at this point, I still hadn't decided if I was keeping the water slide, so that was irrelevant. Once you get that placed, trim the tops with a straight edge. And then I cut the tails at the bottom. I cut those flat. At this point, we're taking off the water slide, and I already know that, so I took the paper out, and we're peeling all of that up at once. Instead of using the water slide, I decided to go through with a band of the same vinyl that I used for the edging. The sparkle of this cup in person is just beyond words. So the water slide seemed to dull the sparkle. Like it wasn't sparkly enough for the cup. So instead I went through with the vinyl. And there you have it, epoxy, and you are set. Let me know if you have any questions.